The Narcan Dominion had conquered over 100 star systems, bent the wills of species that had walked the void for millennia, and held dominion over the galactic stage. Their war fleets, sleek and indomitable, carried their empires like a storm across the stars. To them, humanity was a curiosity at best, a backwater species still fumbling with its first interstellar steps. That changed the moment they kidnapped Danny Dexter. The abduction was a mistake, an oversight, a clerical error that would go down in history as the worst miscalculation the Narcan had ever made. Danny didn't even see it coming. 1 minute, he was sitting in his backyard, sipping a root beer and trying to beat his best time on his handheld gaming console. The next, a deep hum filled the air, followed by a sharp crack. Reality twisted, shimmered, and then swallowed him whole. When his vision cleared, he was floating, weightless, inside a dimly lit chamber surrounded by massive, chitin-armored beings that smelled faintly of boiled seafood. His console, still in his hands, hovered in front of him. The aliens loomed, their many eyes scanning him with a mix of intrigue and expectation. Danny took a deep breath, cracked his knuckles, and said the first thing that came to mind. "All right, which one of you nerds is in charge?" Silence. The Narcan were not used to being spoken to like this. Prisoners screamed, begged, groveled. This child, this human, merely scowled at them, as if they had interrupted something important. The largest of the aliens stepped forward, his mandibles twitching. Captain Vrelak, decorated war commander of the Narcan Dominion, regarded the boy with his 4 black, beady eyes. "You are Daniel Dexter, offspring of General Samuel Dexter of the human military," Vrelak intoned. His voice had the smooth, practiced cadence of someone who had delivered many ultimatums before. "You will comply with our interrogation or suffer the consequences." Danny snorted. "Wow, real original, guys. Let me guess. Next, you're going to tell me resistance is futile? Maybe throw me in a holding cell? Do I at least get a snack first, or is this one of those starve the human situations?" A nervous chittering rippled through the room. Vrelak's mandibles clenched. "You do not comprehend the gravity of your situation," he said. "You are a prisoner of the Narcan Dominion. Your father is a high-ranking officer of your species' military. Through you, we will make your people kneel." Danny gave him a slow, thoughtful nod. "Yeah, see, that's going to be a problem. My dad doesn't do kneeling. The last guy who tried to make him kneel lost all his teeth and a chunk of his liver. So maybe rethink your strategy." The captain bristled. The boy's insolence was baffling. Had their intel been wrong? The child should be terrified. The humans, primitive, reckless creatures that they were, should have feared the Dominion. But this one, he was unfazed. Vrelak gestured to one of his subordinates. The alien pressed a sequence of controls on a floating console, and a holographic display appeared. The Narcan fleet, dark and endless, stretched across the void, its sheer size an unspoken declaration of their might. "This is your reality, Daniel Dexter," Vrelak said. "We are the Dominion. We take what we want. No one defies us." Danny squinted at the display, then let out a low whistle. "Man, that's a lot of ships. You guys ever think about doing something productive with all that power? Maybe inventing better Wi-Fi? Because let me tell you, I still can't get a decent connection in my room." Vrelak turned to his second-in-command, Zarlok, whose mandibles twitched in confusion. "Are we certain we took the correct human?" "The DNA scan confirmed it," Zarlok replied, equally bewildered. Danny crossed his arms. "Look, if you guys are going to do the whole interrogation thing, can we speed this up? I was about to hit a high score before you beamed me up, and if my console battery dies before I save, I'm going to be very annoyed." The aliens stared at him. Vrelak exhaled a slow, frustrated breath. "Prepare the transmission," he commanded. "Let the humans know what we have taken from them." Across the vast emptiness of space, deep within the heart of the United Human Nations Military Command, General Samuel Dexter watched as the transmission flickered onto the main screen. At first, all he saw was static. Then, the image sharpened, revealing the sinister visage of a Narcan officer. Dexter's weathered face remained impassive as he crossed his arms, eyes narrowing. "This is Captain Vrelak of the Narcan Dominion," The alien declared, "We have taken your offspring. If you wish for his safe return, you will submit to our demands." Dexter leaned forward, his steely gaze fixed on the screen, but his mind raced. His son. They had his son. The screen shifted, showing Danny, alive, unharmed, and thoroughly unimpressed. "Oh," Danny said, as if just realizing he was on camera. "Hey, Dad." "Yeah. So funny story, these guys? Total amateurs. They don't even have decent snacks. Seriously, I asked for a soda, and they gave me this weird blue sludge. Not great. Also, I think they expect you to freak out and surrender or something. Not really sure." A long silence stretched through the control room. Then, the impossible happened. General Dexter started laughing. The officers in the room turned, eyes wide. Even the AI assistant hesitated before asking, "General, are you?" Dexter wiped a tear from his eye. "Oh, I'm fine." "Really?" He turned back to the screen, his expression sharpening into something dangerous. "Listen up, Squid Boy," Dexter said, his voice deathly calm. "You just kidnapped the wrong kid." Vrelak tilted his head. "Your defiance is foolish. We hold your offspring's life in our hands." Dexter's grin widened. "You think you do. But what you actually have is a ticking time bomb of pure, unfiltered chaos. A 10-year-old hopped up on sugar, boredom, and absolutely no fear of authority. I give it 24 hours before you start begging me to take him back." Danny smirked. He's not wrong. Dexter leaned back, cracking his knuckles. "Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to return my son immediately, and maybe, I won't send half the damn fleet to turn your homeworld into a parking lot. Your move." Vrelak hesitated. The human's confidence was unsettling. "We do not yield to demands," he declared, though his voice wavered just slightly. "The Dominion does not fear humanity." Dexter chuckled. "Oh, buddy, that's adorable. You should." He turned to his officers. "Prep the fleet. We're going to war." On board the Narcan warship, Danny turned to the assembled aliens, eyebrows raised. "Welp, you guys really stepped in it now. Hope you like explosions, 'cause my dad loves them." Vrelak stared at the human child, then at the screen, then back again. For the first time in his career, he felt afraid. The silence that followed General Samuel Dexter's declaration was absolute. For a fleeting moment, the bridge of the Narcan warship felt suspended in time, its crew exchanging uneasy glances, their chitinous limbs twitching with the first hints of doubt. Captain Vrelak, battle-hardened and unwavering in his belief of the Dominion's supremacy, kept his mandibles locked in place, but his many eyes flickered toward the human child still floating before him. Danny Dexter grinned, utterly at ease despite the vastness of the threat looming over him. "That went well," Danny mused, stretching his arms behind his head. "I'd say you guys have about, 12 hours before things start exploding." Vrelak bristled at the sheer absurdity of the situation. This was not how captives behaved. Fear was supposed to set in. Despair should have taken root, but this small human remained maddeningly unshaken. Worse, the father, this so-called General Dexter, did not behave like a desperate man grasping for the survival of his offspring. He had laughed, as if the mere thought of his son being in alien captivity was inconvenient rather than tragic. The transmission had cut out without any further negotiation. No pleas, no bargaining, just a declaration. A single promise of retribution. Vrelak exhaled slowly, commanding his crew with a sharp motion. "Send word to High Command. The humans are irrational. They do not comprehend their place. They will fall as all others have." Across the void, deep within the United Human Nations Primary War Council chamber, an entirely different atmosphere took hold. Generals, admirals, and intelligence officers packed the dimly lit room, all staring at the transmission playback on the central holo display. The moment Danny's nonchalant expression flickered off the screen, the room erupted into motion. "We're going in," Dexter announced, his voice carrying an ironclad finality. A younger officer, fresh-faced and evidently new to the unspoken rules of these meetings, hesitated. "Sir, shouldn't we?" Dexter shot him a look, and whatever thought the officer had been forming promptly died. The Narcan have no idea what they've just done, he continued, placing both hands on the table and leaning forward. They think this is a hostage negotiation. They think we'll act like the other species they've steamrolled into submission. They believe we'll hesitate. A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembled officers. What they don't understand, Dexter said, his voice now carrying a quiet, lethal edge, is that humanity does not handle threats rationally. We handle them personally. The statement was met with nods and grim smiles. Everyone in the room understood what was coming. The Free Danny movement had already begun spreading across Earth like wildfire. Within minutes of the news breaking, every news channel, social media platform, and street corner conversation revolved around the same message. They took one of ours. That means war. Major corporate sponsors pledged resources toward the war effort. The arms industry reported a production surge before any official orders had even been placed. Civilians across every continent pooled money for Rescue Danny t-shirts, billboards, and somehow a coordinated theme song. The United Human Nations fleet, already formidable, now moved with a singularity of purpose unseen in military history. They were not engaging in a defensive war, not fending off invaders or protecting fragile treaties. This was personal. On board the command carrier Indomitable, Admiral Regina Vasquez surveyed the newly mobilized fleet, a smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. I don't think the Squid Boys get it, she mused to her bridge crew. This isn't just a war. This is an event. She turned to her communications officer. Patch me through to General Dexter. A second later, Dexter's face appeared on her screen, his expression unreadable. Admiral. Nice fleet you've assembled, she noted, eyes flicking toward the growing armada on her tactical display. Dexter exhaled sharply, a poor attempt at masking his amusement. This is Phase 1. Vasquez raised an eyebrow. Phase 1. Dexter's smirk returned, this time colder. Let's just say the boys in Black Ops have been waiting for an excuse to try out some unconventional tactics. Back on the Narcan homeworld, the High Council convened in a panic. We should be receiving their surrender, one of the elders hissed, tapping his claws anxiously on the polished table. The humans should be pleading for negotiations. They are funding their own war effort, another counselor interjected, displaying intercepted transmissions from Earth. They are treating this as entertainment. A stillness settled over the chamber. Relaxed transmission had already warned them of the strange defiance exhibited by both the human general and the child they had taken. But even he had underestimated the sheer madness of their adversary. Launch a preemptive strike, the eldest among them finally declared. We must show them the futility of their defiance. The Narcan fleet mobilized, their warships peeling away from their strongholds and setting course for the Sol system. Their objective was simple: break humanity before it could become a true threat. But as they exited slipspace and entered the outer perimeter of Earth's defense grid, they were greeted not by the fear-stricken resistance they had anticipated, but by a transmission so utterly bizarre that, for a moment, their entire battle net stalled in confusion. The image on their screens was not that of human military officials issuing demands. It was a middle-aged man wearing wraparound sunglasses and a Hawaiian shirt, leaning against what appeared to be a barbecue grill. Howdy, fellas, the man greeted, lifting a can of beer. Welcome to Earth. You're about to have a real bad time. The transmission cut off, and then the bombardment began. The Narcan fleet, accustomed to calculated warfare, was utterly unprepared for the sheer absurdity of human combat tactics. Instead of methodical strikes, they were met with an onslaught of kinetic bombardment rods, tungsten projectiles dropped from orbit that hit like meteors. Instead of precision fleet maneuvers, the humans rammed their ships into enemy formations, boarding via jetpacks. Instead of psychological warfare designed to break morale, the human comms were filled with laughter, rock music, and most disturbingly, betting pools on who would rack up the highest kill count. One of the Narcan fleet commanders watched in horror as an enemy pilot, broadcasting on an open frequency, simply hooped before deliberately spiraling his fighter into a Narcan capital ship's bridge while screaming, "Yee-haw." The humans fought not just with overwhelming firepower, but with reckless enthusiasm. It was madness. The battle, expected to last days, was over in hours. Relak, still on board his warship with a human child in tow, watched in silence as his forces fell one by one. His mind reeled at the sheer impossibility of it. "They shouldn't be winning," he muttered, gripping the console. "This isn't how war works." Danny, now sitting cross-legged in the captain's chair as if it were his living room couch, popped another piece of alien fruit into his mouth. "You really don't get humans, do you?" he asked, watching the carnage unfold with the mild interest of a kid watching Saturday morning cartoons. Relak turned sharply, mandibles clicking in frustration. "Enlighten me, child." Danny smirked. "You thought you were fighting soldiers. You're not." He gestured toward the human forces overwhelming the Narcan fleet with a mix of glee and brutality. "You're fighting an entire species that grew up watching action movies where the underdogs always win." Relak remained silent. "You think this is a war," Danny continued. "It's not. It's a revenge story. And buddy," the battle outside reached its climax as the humans launched one final, devastating assault. "You're the bad guys." The void of space had never been so loud. The Narcan fleet, a marvel of interstellar engineering, had spread itself in formation across the battlefield, its captains confident in their overwhelming firepower and superior numbers. Their war doctrine was simple: strike fast, overwhelm the enemy, and leave nothing standing. It had worked against hundreds of civilizations before. But this time, something was wrong. The humans weren't fleeing. They weren't negotiating. They weren't even fighting with the cold precision of a race that knew its survival was at stake. No, the humans were laughing. On the bridge of his flagship, Captain Vrelak gripped the console with all four of his clawed hands, his mandibles locked so tightly that the joints ached. He watched as the human fleet, instead of maintaining traditional battle formations, broke apart into chaotic, erratic attack patterns that defied every known rule of war. Where there should have been discipline, there was reckless abandon. Where there should have been calculated strategy, there was insane bravado. And worst of all, they were winning. Vrelak's second-in-command, Tsar Lok, could barely contain his distress. "Sir, they're ships. They're charging straight into our lines. They aren't even following predictable flight patterns." Vrelak growled, his mind struggling to comprehend the madness before him. His eyes scanned the battle feed, picking up on the human tactics. Tungsten rods, nicknamed rods from God, had been launched from orbit at speeds that rendered energy shielding useless, creating massive explosions wherever they landed. Enemy vessels, smaller and supposedly weaker than their own, weren't retreating. They were closing the distance, boarding Narcan ships with jetpacks and magnetic boots. The transmission lines crackled, and to his horror, human voices flooded the command channel. "Oh yeah, that's another one down, boys. Who had $50 on Ramirez making the first breach? You owe me, McKinley. Someone tell command we need more ammo and beer, preferably in that order." There was no fear in their voices, no desperation, only gleeful destruction. A screeching guitar riff interrupted the battle chatter, followed by a voice yelling, "Welcome to the war party." Then came the music. The Narcan bridge filled with the deep, pounding chords of AC/DC's Thunderstruck, as the human fleet blasted ancient Terran battle anthems across open channels. Vrelak's brain short-circuited. This wasn't a war. This was entertainment for them. "Cut their transmissions," he barked. "Now." Tsar Lok fumbled at the controls, mandibles clicking in frustration. I can't. They've overridden our frequency permissions." Vrelak whirled around, rage burning through his veins. "You're telling me these primitives hacked our communications network in the middle of combat?" "It's worse than that," Tsar Lok stammered. They're live streaming the battle." The main display flickered, and suddenly, instead of tactical readouts, the screen showed a human pilot, wearing reflective aviators and a bandana, grinning wildly into his cockpit camera. "Hey, Galactic viewers. Welcome back to the stream. Today, we're absolutely thrashing some tentacle-faced tyrants. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more intergalactic smackdowns." Vrelak's mind shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces. "They think this is a game. His shout barely registered over the next sonic boom as the humans deployed their next devastating surprise. A capital ship-sized railgun, hidden behind one of Jupiter's moons, fired a hypervelocity slug straight through the heart of the Narcan dreadnought, splitting it in half in a single, catastrophic explosion. Vrelak's mandibles went slack. That was it. He had seen enough. "Sound a full retreat," he commanded, his voice void of its usual confidence. Zarlok hesitated. "Sir, the Dominion Council." "I said retreat." But before the order could be fully relayed, the ship lurched violently. A new warning siren blared across the bridge, and the internal comms flared with panic. Human infiltrators on board. Vrelak's claws tightened. The impossible had happened. The humans had breached his flagship. The ship's security feeds blinked to life, showing live footage of the boarding parties. They weren't moving like normal soldiers. There was no rigid discipline, no synchronized formations. They were unhinged. A giant of a man, clad in heavy armor with a cigar clenched between his teeth, carried a minigun like it was a toy. He was laughing, spraying bullets down the corridor as he shouted, "Get some! Get some!" A smaller, leaner human sprinted ahead, tossing an object through a doorway before casually yelling, "Flashbang out." Vrelak watched in confusion as, instead of a flashbang, a rubber chicken landed in the middle of the enemy formation. For a brief second, the Narcan guards hesitated. Then the chicken exploded, unleashing a concussive blast that sent them flying. Through the smoke, a third human, wearing a cowboy hat, leapt into the fray, dual-wielding plasma revolvers. The humans weren't just soldiers. They were characters from their own myths of war. Vrelak turned away from the feed, his breathing ragged. He looked to the one remaining calm presence in the room, the child. Danny Dexter sat in his chair, munching on an alien fruit like he was watching an action movie. "This," Vrelak breathed, voice barely a whisper, "this is not war." Danny grinned. "Nope." He popped another piece of fruit into his mouth, chewing thoughtfully. "This is what happens when you mess with people who grew up watching Die Hard." Vrelak's exoskeleton practically vibrated with frustration. "What is Die Hard?" Danny leaned back. "Oh, buddy, you're about to find out." Before Vrelak could demand clarification, the bridge doors blew inward. A titan of a man stood in the smoke, the red glow of his cigar the only thing visible before the dust cleared. General Samuel Dexter stepped into the room. His uniform was singed, his face smeared with soot, and his shotgun was still smoking from its last victim. His eyes locked onto Vrelak, unblinking, unreadable. Vrelak, legendary warlord, conqueror of 100 worlds, commander of the Dominion's most elite forces, found himself backing away. Dexter exhaled, sending out a puff of cigar smoke. "You took my kid." Vrelak swallowed. "We can negotiate." Dexter smiled. It was not a nice smile. "No," he said, raising his shotgun. "We can't." And then he pulled the trigger. The smoke was still thick in the air when the last shot rang out. Captain Vrelak, feared warlord of the Narcan Dominion, crumpled to the ground, his mandibles twitching in stunned disbelief. The bridge of his once mighty flagship, the relentless Dominion, lay in ruins. Consoles sparked, alarms blared, and the flickering lights cast ominous shadows across the crumbling command deck. General Samuel Dexter lowered his shotgun with the slow precision of a man who had delivered justice, then stepped forward, his heavy boots thudding against the floor. His gaze flickered to the smoking hole in Vrelak's chest, then to his son, still lounging in the captain's chair like he had just finished a casual round of Space Invaders. Danny popped another piece of stolen alien fruit into his mouth and grinned. "Took you long enough." Dexter exhaled through his nose, stepping over the twitching corpse of Vrelak. "Danny, what the hell are you doing sitting in that chair?" Danny shrugged. "Look, if he's dead, then technically I'm in charge of this ship now. And I gotta say, I think I'm doing a pretty good job." Dexter rubbed his temple, then turned toward the rest of his squad, all of whom were standing in the smoldering wreckage of what had once been the most advanced warship in the Narcan fleet. Admiral Vasquez's voice crackled through the comms. "Dexter, do we have confirmation? Is the flagship secure?" Dexter took in the sheer devastation surrounding him. One of his Marines was using a Narcan commander's severed tentacle as a victory flag. Another had managed to hack into the ship's announcement system and was blasting the theme song from Top Gun through every speaker. Dexter sighed. Yeah, we got it. The entire battlefield was descending into pure, unfiltered chaos. The remaining Narcan ships, those that weren't already blown to hell, were surrendering en masse, their captains broadcasting desperate messages in broken English. Please, we do not wish further. Smoke show, one stammered. Our engines, what is this human NOS system? Why is your pilot so fast? Another gasped before his transmission cut out in a burst of static. A third Narcan captain, weeping, held up an image of Danny Dexter, on his ship's main screen. We surrender. We do not wish to anger the small one. The small one is cunning. He tricked our entire bridge crew into drinking carbonated sugar poison. Danny snickered. Oh yeah, that was a good one. The Dominion's once glorious war fleet had been shattered, not just by human firepower, but by the sheer, unrelenting insanity of human combat. Their soldiers had boarded enemy ships using motorcycles launched from drop pods. They had converted captured vessels into battle-ready space hot rods. One squadron had successfully hijacked an entire war cruiser using only duct tape, a bag of fireworks, and a complete lack of regard for personal safety. This wasn't just a war. This was a party. And the Narcan? They weren't invited. Dexter reached over and ruffled his son's hair, then turned back toward the main viewport, where the remnants of the alien fleet were beginning the long, humiliating retreat. The once dominant empire of the Narcan Dominion, the same one that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, had just lost a war over a single human child. Dexter exhaled. Well, I'd call that a win. Danny smirked. Understatement of the century. Across the galaxy, news of the battle spread at light speed. The Galactic Senate, which had long feared the unstoppable might of the Dominion, found itself in absolute chaos. Let me get this straight, an Andarian senator demanded, rubbing his temples. The humans won? An aide nodded, his mandibles clicking nervously. Not just one, sir. They humiliated them. They're soldiers. How do I say this politely? They fight like absolute maniacs. Another senator, a reptilian diplomat from the Kthari Confederacy, leaned forward. And the humans, they did this for a child. Silence stretched across the room. Then someone whispered, they went to war for one single child. A collective shudder rippled through the assembly. The implications were terrifying. If humans were willing to unleash this level of destruction over one of their own, what would happen if someone threatened more? And more importantly, how insane were they when it came to their adults? The Narcan Emperor himself, previously the most feared being in the known universe, had been reduced to a quivering wreck. His 8 eyes darted around the throne room, mandibles twitching in nervous spasms. I was wrong, he muttered. The humans. We should not anger the humans. The new galactic superpower had been established. Not because humanity had conquered the stars with diplomacy. Not because they had spent centuries building their fleet. Not because of a slow and methodical rise to power. No, they had accidentally terrified the entire galaxy because some idiots had kidnapped a 10-year-old. Back on Earth, the celebration had already begun. The Free Danny movement had turned into a global holiday. Street parties erupted. The largest fireworks display in human history lit up the sky. T-shirts, action figures, and movies were already in development. Danny Dexter, now officially the most famous kid in the galaxy, sat in a presidential suite with a soda in one hand and a cheeseburger in the other, watching his dad's fleet take a victory lap around the moon. The news anchor on screen, barely able to contain his laughter, summarized the entire affair in one sentence. Well, folks, it's official. The aliens messed around and they found out. General Dexter, sitting across from his son, leaned back in his chair, sipping a whiskey. So, how's it feel knowing you're a galactic legend now? Danny took a long sip of his root beer, then grinned. Meh. Kinda cool, I guess. But you know what would be really cool? Dexter raised an eyebrow. What? Danny's grin widened. If I didn't have to go back to school on Monday. The general snorted. Nice try, kid. Danny groaned. Worth a shot. Outside, humanity's fleet drifted through the void, now the most feared and respected force in the galaxy. A simple message, broadcast on all channels, was sent out as Earth's final response to the Dominion. A short clip. A single image. Danny Dexter, standing in front of a burning Narcan warship, holding a sign that read, "Don't mess with Earth." The message was received, loud and clear,